Today, I'm making Asajj Ventress's lightsabers. I haven't done those ones yet, have I? Honestly, it's getting hard to keep track. This build, I used craft foam, dowel foam, a coat hanger, magnets, super glue, a wooden dowel, reflective tape, clear packing tape, paint, cutting tools, sanding tools, safety gear, scissors, razor pens, and a box cutter. I like to do these lightsaber builds a little bit differently each time, just so I'm not rehashing the same build. So today I'm going to start out with a length of wide EVA foam dowel, which you can get at most craft stores. First I cut 2 equal lengths of the dowel, roughly 9 inches, one standard Graflex. That's my unit of measurement. Then I dismantled a metal coat hanger. Has to be a metal one. People don't like to use these anymore because they can get rust on your clothes. I've never had that happen, but I keep a bunch on hand for prop making and to use as industrial twist ties for temporary car repair. See, that's not supposed to come off. So sick of cherry rigging this thing. Support me on Patreon so I can stop wasting time on ad hoc car repair. I cut a length of coat hanger wire slightly shorter than the dowel and pressed it into the foam. Get in there. I said get. Yeah, it helps if you drill a pilot hole first. Once it was all the way in there, I bent the dowel and by extension, the metal inside. The metal will stay bent and so will the dowel. Next, I made the actual emitter, which in this case is narrower than the handle. Usually goes the other way. Does it? I don't know. I used a half-round narrow foam bevel for the emitter and cut 2 identical short lengths. Then I took 4mm craft foam and traced the bevel dimensions onto that. I super glued all these pieces together to form the basic emitter assembly. Now it's still gonna need a lot more detail, so I added a wrap made from 2mm craft foam, black foam. Black's a good base color. If you have a choice, black is a good base color for any prop that has to come out metallic by the end. White's better for color. In this case, I was out of black dowels in the thicker diameter. So I just use white. I mean, the whole thing has to be painted anyway. I'm just saying. I super glued that to the emitter. Then for the end of the emitter, I carved a guard? Yeah, sure. Out of 4mm EVA foam. I trimmed and rounded the corners on my belt sander. Then I cut a hole in the center for the blade. I'm using a flat-headed blade in the razor pen on this one, so that the hole would be rectangular. I mean, you could use a regular blade, but with a shape this small, it can get frustrating. Then I super glued it to the emitter using a dummy blade as a guide. The blade on this one is actually going to be flat rather than the dowels that I normally use, just because that works better with this particular hilt design. I made a sight. It looks like a sight to me. I know that makes no sense. Whatever. The thing that sticks out of the end, reminiscent of Anakin's Graflex saber. Ventress's saber is Clone Wars era, and she was trained by Dooku, so I like that there's influence from both his saber design and the general lightsabers of the time, which I actually like because it's a nice tie-in. Fun fact, Christopher Lee actually had real-world combat experience. He was a spy in World War II. Probably what makes him such a good actor. It's like spying with no real stakes. Also related to Charlemagne. Anyway, if he trained her, then her saber would be in a similar style, right? That's just my headcanon. I don't know. I like the continuity. It came out a little jagged, so I smoothed it out with my rotary tool and a drum bit attachment. This has to be done very delicately because the rotary tool likes to go off in tangents. I have no idea what that's like. Am I right, audience? And I don't want to be forced to include battle damage on my prop. Yes, you're gonna weather this lightsaber whether you like it or not. No rotary tool, don't do it! Once I finish sanding, I use super glue to attach these pieces for time and convenience. Contact cement's kind of overkill for a prop this small. I suppose you could use hot glue, but that gets tricky. I cut a bevel scrap for the only button on this saber. The ones at the base are actually belt hooks. I mean, it only needs one button, right? There's a big open space underneath, so I added some scrap foam in there to fill it in. They're heat sinks, because sci-fi. Once the stack was assembled, I glued it in. Then I worked on the flanges on the outside. Flanges? They're really more of grips. Whatever. I'm not getting paid to proofread, clearly. I cut 4 grips from 2mm EVA foam and glued the first one just below the emitter. Then I alternated them down the hilt. Then I moved on to the pommel. It's the same thing, but just a little bit wider and 2 layers thick. They're stacked on top of each other and super glued it on. Next, for the buttons, I took a section of black foam dowel, sanded a curve into one end so that it would sit flush against the surface of the saber hilt, and then I cut that section from the dowel. The reason for sanding it first is because it's easier to hold on to this way, and sanding tools have a tendency to launch small foam pieces across the room. This was an offcut from an earlier build, I'm not sure which one, but I do save them just because, I mean, look, it's coming in handy right now. I stacked pieces of varying diameter on top of each other to make the groove that allows the saber to fit into the belt hook. Oh, I want to point out here that there's a company that actually sells these lightsaber belt hooks, like for real. So if you're following along to make an Asajj Ventress cosplay and you have the budget for it, then you might want to consider picking one of those up, just because they're going to be stronger than foam. The whole point of the foam is it bends, it's flexible, so it's less likely to get destroyed. But that flexibility works against it when you're making a belt hook, you know? So just think about what the prop is going to be used for when you're building it, and let that influence your decision to prevent future problems. I glued the buttons to the saber hilt, actually not buttons, clearly, belt hook and a dial. Then I attached it. Something that I noticed about Asajj's lightsabers is that the color of the blade changes depending on various factors, which I sort of view as a reflection of the personality of the wielder, or at least it has changed since the show, which I thought was a nice touch, because people change over time. And there's just a few more details. A small wrap around the exterior of the hilt, towards the emitter, where the emitter and the base meet up. That's made of more 2mm EVA foam. It's really just to hide/shore up the connection. Then I cut more coat hangers to add the support bars on the outside. Now she's supposed to actually have two sabers, and they stick together at the base, because of course they do. They're detachable. So I put some hot glue on the end and stuck a magnet in there, and got it to rapidly cool using a metal block. This will keep the magnet close to the surface and ensure that the glue solidifies flat on the base of the pommel. I did let it sit there a bit longer than usual before moving on though, because heat rises and foam insulates, thus slowing down the cooling process and making it more likely that if I were to lift this up too quickly, the magnet would separate from the hilt and stay stuck to the metal block. All this is to make sure that the two sabers adapt correctly. Did I say two? Now wash, rinse, and repeat. When they were both built, I painted them. To prep for paint, I gave it a very quick blast of the heat gun. First I gave them a coat of flat black paint. This will allow me to see some of the problem areas once the first layer dries. Then when that dried, I went over it again with gloss black acrylic house paint. I'll have to do several coats. When all the layers dried, I masked off the parts that I wanted to remain black and covered the whole thing with rub and buff metallic finish. This is not the shiniest metallic coating, but in the show, just the animation style, her lightsabers are practically gray, like battleship gray, so I'm okay with it. Then for the blade, I found a dowel and I wrapped it with reflective safety tape. Because the adhesion on that tape isn't fantastic over a curved surface, I then wrapped it with clear packaging tape, which holds a lot better. I know that the LED blades are popular, but in photographs, those don't really look so good. It's the thing with camera flashes, they're designed to illuminate the shot as much as possible, which has the effect of canceling out the LED blades, which really only look good in low light. But reflective tape will throw nearly 100% of that flashbulb light straight back into the camera, actually causing what would be considered a lens flare, but it ends up looking like actual lightsabers. So that's what I've been doing. Hey, it was good enough for the original trilogy. Good enough for me. Con photographers hate me, but they can get in line. Also for fan films, if you're doing a post effect, it's 1,000 times easier to see a reflective blade than a painted wooden stunt blade. Speaking from experience. And there we go. And that's how to make Asajj Ventress's lightsabers. Now I just have to find an actor willing to shave her head. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, then you can show your support by hitting the like, subscribe, and bell icon to be notified of future uploads. If you're interested in supporting the channel, then you can check out the link in the description down below for patron channel services. Anything pledged goes towards improving the video quality, prop quality, and shop equipment, which allows me to produce higher quality content for you all to enjoy. Alright, happy crafting. See you later.